Welcome, everybody. Tonight, we're fortunate to have Heidi Lee Douglas as our guest speaker. Heidi is the National Director of Solar Citizens, which is an independent, community-based organisation working to grow renewable energy and clean transport in Australia. Those of you who attended our Smart Energy Expo in June will remember Heidi from the two panels she was on, In Your Home and Councils. As well as her work with Solar Citizens, she's an independent councillor for Bayside Council. I believe she's the Deputy Mayor now, and an award-winning film and television director. Her films include Defendant 5, which follows the fight to save Tasmania's native forests 2 decades ago. As a result of that campaign, Heidi and 19 others were sued by the woodchip giant Guns for $6.4 million for supposedly conspiring to destroy the company's business. Heidi was actually defendant number 5 in the court case. She had only just got married, and she and her husband risked losing everything. So it must have been an awful time for her, but fate had a way of turning the tables, and the judge found in the defendant's favour. Guns went bankrupt and the forests were saved. They're now a World Heritage Area. So as a former activist with the Wilderness Society myself, that is over 30 years ago, I well remember Guns and just how ruthless it was as a company. When I heard it had gone out of business, I felt there actually was some justice in the world after all. Heidi and her fellow activists did a huge favour to the people of Tasmania, Australia and the world. Anyway, tonight, Heidi will be telling us about Solar Citizens and how our two organisations can work together to promote renewable energy and get emissions down. After her presentation, there'll be time for questions, and I know there'll be plenty of those. So over to you, Heidi.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Let me just share screen. This is the right buttons, and there we go. So I wanted to talk tonight about our Defend and Extend campaign because it's the thing that's most on the tip of my tongue at the moment, because we're moving into a federal election where energy is the focus once again. So I wanted to tell you about the role that Solar Citizens is intending to play over the next 6 months. So a bit about me. My name's Heidi Lee Douglas. I live with my family on the lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal clans of the Eora Nation here in Bayside, New South Wales, on the edge of Botany Bay. And I'm the CEO of Solar Citizens and a local councillor and deputy mayor at Bayside Council. And I've got over 20 years experience working in the intersection between politics, personal narrative and social change. Solar Citizens, I came on board as a CEO 2.5 years ago after working at Parents for Climate Action as their campaigns and communications director on the Solar Our Schools campaign. And I became very passionate about solar for social good after we secured $71 million from Liberal governments in Tasmania and New South Wales to put solar and batteries on schools. When the opportunity came about to take over Solar Citizens as CEO, I was very excited about what I could do with Solar Citizens to drive the uptake of clean transport to address cost of living, and also renewable energy on the rooftops to address cost of living issues, because I really believe that cost of living is the great unifier for all of us, especially in these difficult financial times. So I took over the same week, Solar Citizens the same week that Anthony Albanese took over the Labor federal government. So we also had a cost of living crisis that week and an energy crisis with the Ukraine war. So became an opportunity to really think about how can we use rooftop renewables to solve the energy and cost of living crisis, but also to drive down carbon emissions. So Solar Citizens has already been around for 13 years, and we're a community voice for renewable energy and clean transport. And our vision is for an Australia where our homes, businesses and transport are run entirely by renewable energy. And here's a little bit of a potted history. You can see Claire O'Rourke, who is our previous national director up there in the top left-hand corner, with a younger Anthony Albanese at a National Labor Party conference back when they were in opposition. And Solar Citizens helped drive the ALP to commit to what was then 50% renewables by 2030. And that's our mascot, Sunny, there with Tanya Plibersek and Bill Shorten. We've done a lot of work in Queensland in particular after Bill Shorten didn't get elected, on working on making that state more amenable to renewable energy so they could phase out of their state-owned coal-fired power. So there we had a shop front in Townsville for a while and have done a lot of work in Townsville, driving a renewable energy industrial precinct there as a lighthouse project for a good news transition story for Queensland. We've also been working now with the new Labor government to push them in the right direction, including things like the Future Made in Australia, Household Energy Upgrades Fund, and the new vehicle efficiency standards as well. So you can see our electric ute roadshow there that we ran from Ballarat to Brisbane as a sort of tentpole, get people involved to see that in the regions they actually have the most gain from the move to clean transport because they drive the most and have the most vehicles. So our organisational strengths are that we're a recognised NGO with more than decade-long experience. We work with the brains trust of industry experts, including people on the board who bring us a wealth of knowledge. We have a deep understanding of government, including financial processes and policy development. And we're a leader in informative storytelling. So I think this is where my filmmaker side really kicks in, is I love to unpack complicated concepts like the energy system and make them easy for people to understand. So we're a go-to for people like The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald, ABC, and this year as well, we were on A Current Affair as well. So some of the highlights from this year are the passing of the new vehicle efficiency standards finally in the federal parliament, the support for the solar manufacturing of Future Made in Australia. We've been also advocating for climate safe housing, driving the uptake of solar on apartments, rentals and social housing nationwide. So the people who are currently locked out of the cost of living savings from clean energy. In Queensland, we secured a solar for renters commitment from the LNP in the lead up to the state election. And we've also seen clean energy and jobs plan being legislated with bipartisan support, a landmark legislation on renewable energy and emissions. So they were really big campaigns we worked on for a number of years, well before my time as CEO. But more recently, we've been doing renewable energy leadership training in Townsville and the Sunshine Coast to get people on the ground trained up about to be energy champions. And we've been advocating for a 9-point plan for the Queensland government and the opposition in a race to the top on solar and renewables in the state election. And we've seen a change of government there. So we intend to play the role that we've played in New South Wales, which, you know, when the Minns governments came in, they had been in opposition a long time and they didn't have a suite of policies to support consumer energy resources. So our plan is to play that role with the new Chris Woolley government. And we're expanding our 9-point plan into what we call the yellow book to give to them, to show them the way that they can actually drive down those carbon emissions by adopting policies to support consumer energy resources, because they don't have a plan currently for how they're going to drive down emissions. In New South Wales this year, we helped secure a home battery rebate for residents, which I'll go into more, $175 million co-funding from the New South Wales government for social housing energy upgrades, including solar, which the federal government also chipped in the other half. $30 million for clean energy access for locked out households, including apartments and renters for solar gardens. A consumer energy resources roadmap, which is something we've been pushing for from the first day that the Minns government took over, so that they actually had a plan of what they were going to do with all these amazing assets we have on rooftops to make them work for us, so that we don't just keep putting money into aging coal-fired power plants. And we've been working on the ground in Wallay Creek and doing a pilot project there called Electrify Wallay Creek, which is a high-rise electrification project, which really goes into how do we retrofit high-rise, but how do we also make sure that the new push for high density in the New South Wales and Victorian governments makes those high-rises energy producers, not just energy consumers. Because it's actually a lot harder to retrofit apartments than it is to set them up right in the first place for clean energy. And we've also been running energy equity workshops to lift voices from Sydney's western suburbs and culturally and linguistically diverse communities. This is a little snapshot of how we won the New South Wales battery incentive campaign. So we firstly found out that the New South Wales government was looking at a peak demand reduction scheme, but the amount of money that they were going to put into that for consumers on an individual basis was very low. So we argued that they needed to raise that amount to make it cost effective for people to get batteries. And then simultaneously, we fought against the extension of the Eraring coal-fired power plant. And we fought the sun tax, so the two-way tariff against solar owners to charge them to export solar into the grid. So we got angry about that on Channel 9 in the Sydney Morning Herald, the Guardian and Newcastle Herald, and used that to say the government should be giving us a carrot rather than a stick approach and giving us rebates for batteries so that we can soak up that good clean energy during the day and use it at night. We also then brought out the troops. So our base of Solar Citizen supporters sent thousands of emails to the New South Wales Premier and Energy Minister reiterating our call for a battery scheme rather than a sun tax. And then we had the announcement of the win. So from the 1st of November, New South Wales households can now apply for a battery rebate. And then we asked for more. So I went on a current affair and asked for the federal government to also provide a battery rebate. That leads us up to the federal election, which is shaping up to be a contest over energy. And there's a real threat to consumer energy resources. But before I go on, I'll just stop there for a moment in case there's any questions before I go into the second half of the presentation.
Well, there'll be a ton of questions, Heidi. We've got some that have been pre-prepared that people have already put in. They've been sitting there for a couple of months. Why don't you finish up and then we'll have the questions all in one.
Okay, will do. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so you can see that again. So as I said, the federal election is shaping up to be a contest over energy. Then there's a real threat to consumer energy resources at the moment with the push for nuclear in particular. So I'll unpack that more. So why does this matter? Well, because small-scale solar has been doing the heavy lifting in the energy transition. Our campaign seeks to amplify these carbon reduction wins and champion the clean power of small-scale solar. So as you can see, small-scale solar is really punching above its weight in terms of what it's doing in terms of reducing our carbon emissions and replacing coal and gas on the grid. It's a good news story worldwide, and we really want to grow that in Australia and be world leaders for consumer energy resources here that the rest of the world can look to. And we see COP31 as a potentially great time for the rest of the world to learn from what we've done in Australia to support consumer energy resources, but we need to get there. So our campaign is really twofold, and we have the know-how and the reputation to do this campaign, which is called Defend and Extend. So the objective is to influence small-scale renewable energy policy commitments in the lead up to the federal election. And to do that, we're targeting audiences in specific electorates in Queensland, New South Wales, Western Australia, and Victoria, with high solar uptake, where we need to defend household solar against a nuclear solar switch off, and where we can pressure MPs to extend household renewables. So in terms of defending, we want to protect the renewables that are there on people's rooftops, the $25 billion of money that Australians have already invested into their home solar systems. And we want to help shift the coalition to be more supportive towards renewable energy policies and curtail anti-renewable sentiments, and simultaneously extend by growing renewables to promote policies to replace coal and gas by advocating for federal targets for solar and battery installations. So we're saying 1 million batteries by 2030 and at least 2 million more solar by 2030. Home solar. So our theory of change is that nuclear will lead to your solar being switched off. Basically, if we activate the voice of our solar owners and grow our base in coalition electorates where there's high home solar uptake, then the coalition will face aggravated home solar owners and face negative backlash against nuclear, because nuclear needs to run 24/7 to be economically viable. Home solar would be forced to switch off during the day. So we want to educate people in those high solar uptake electorates about the risk of going nuclear, basically, and use their voice loud and clear back to their MPs that they need to act to protect the rooftop solar investments that Australians have made. So our campaign tactics include political lobbying. So we've been doing Sunniest Neighbourhood campaigns for the last 2 years now, where we give awards to the highest solar producing postcodes around Australia, so home solar producing postcodes, and a lot of them are Queensland regional LNP electorates. We will be doing a digital campaign around saving our solar. narrative shifting with our media campaign based on polling. We'll be doing digital campaigning as well, where we draw on our list to do digital actions and supporter actions targeted directly at politicians. In-person campaigning through community power building with stalls and events and materials that we give to champions in key electorates, and scorecards for solar owners in key regions. And case studies. We already have a case study library of more than 40 people, and we want to grow that to 90 people so that we can share those stories, stories like Ken's, in both mainstream media and social media. So simultaneously, we'll be working to extend the support for home renewables as a key solution to rising energy and cost of living, which we've already been doing for the last couple of years. But basically, if we activate our supporter base of early adopters who want support for home batteries and boost the voice of those missing out on the benefits of home solar, then we can build support for policies that extend the uptake of consumer energy resources from the public, political parties and independents, because consumer energy resources reduce the cost of living and accelerate the transition to real zero. They also help build the social license for renewable energy in the suburbs and the regions. And our Extend campaign tactics have been and continue to be building bipartisan support for consumer energy resources in Queensland, working on key decision-making around the national energy market reform, including a national consumer energy roadmap, making sure the New South Wales government is also open to those reforms, which I've mentioned previously, and longer term as making sure that Australia has global leadership with consumer energy resources at COP31. So that's, in a nutshell, the Defend and Extend campaign that we'll be rolling out. All of that is contingent on the support of solar citizens. So we're 100% funded by philanthropic and small donations. So at the moment, I'm driving to raise the budget so we can actually do this campaign. And thanks for listening. Oh, you're on mute, Ken.
Sorry about that. Thanks very much. That was absolutely fantastic. And we're going to open up for questions now. And I'm going to hog the first question. So here you go. I read the Murdoch Press every day, mainly because I write letters to all of the papers, but particularly to the Telegraph and the Australian. And the Australian is running a war against against renewable energy. It is literally a war. Every day there'll be a half a dozen to a dozen articles attacking renewable energy. The Telegraph's doing similar, but not as much because it's more interested in sport and gossip and so on. We're trying to counter this by getting letters published in those papers, but what else can we do? Because there is no other side of the story being presented other than the occasional letter to the editor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that infiltrating the Murdoch media with good news stories about renewable energy would be a great thing to do. And we do, as much as possible, try and get those stories out there using real life people, case studies. We do well in terms of media, mainstream media, in terms of radio coverage, as I said, like news coverage. But also a lot of our campaign will be focused on digital campaigning as well. So getting Facebook ads basically out to people in those strategic electorates and getting them to sign petitions and getting them engaged and activated so that we're actually bypassing some of that biased media.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way we can actually get proper articles and more information into the Murdoch Press? Because it's just a lie fest. It is one piece of misinformation after another. It's just appalling reading it.
Are you talking mostly about large scale renewable attacks rather than small scale?
It's all of it. They're attacking everything. They're attacking electric vehicles, saying they're finished. They're attacking solar. They're attacking batteries, saying that they're a waste of time. They're attacking large scale solar and wind from multiple perspectives. It's just it's almost overwhelming. It's so bad.
Maybe send some articles through. I know we do media tracking on what media coverage is happening, but I guess we mostly see a lot of good news stories as well coming through with other media outlets. But definitely I'm interested to hear more about those attacks, Ken, and if we can counter them.
Well, we read the papers every day. I read the Australian Telegraph and check what's in there, and then write letters every day to try to respond.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to get the word across, and it's just a bubble. Yeah, anyway, enough of me hogging. If anybody else has got a question, and I know Rick's got a question about Walleye Creek, can you just press the button, raise your hand electronically? Rick, do you want to ask your question about Walleye Creek?
Yeah, can you, Heidi, can you tell us more about Electrify Walleye Creek? Because that sounds like it's been quite a fascinating project, and how that might apply to us and other parts of Sydney.
So Electrify Walleye Creek came about because I knew some locals who had joined the strata there, the co-op, who wanted to focus on the electrification of that precinct. So it's the third highest density precinct in New South Wales. I happen to live down the road. It's part of the Bayside community that I represent as a councillor. And I knew from talking to the Council of Capital City Lord Mayors that high-rise is a really hard thing for them to solve in terms of electrification and renewable energy. So I thought, well, let's support this grassroots group to help them with their electrification journey, and we can help solve the issues and capture what policy settings would need to change so that we could replicate that retrofit of the electrification for high rises in more jurisdictions in New South Wales, but also nationally. So that's what we've done. We've been doing work on the ground with the community there, and we've released a report recently, the Electrify Walleye Creek report, which captures all the learnings so far around what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. And there is a whole lot of policy recommendations in there for the state government, specifically on retrofitting, but also around what we need to do with the new transport-oriented developments. So you would know that there's 40 transport-oriented developments proposed around Greater Sydney by the Minns government to address the housing crisis. And they have been a bit controversial because there wasn't any community consultation nor consultation with any groups like ours, although we did put a submission in through one of the people who was on the one of the government bodies that was assessing it. And so things like renewable energy and electrification, or even just having EV charging, have not been part of the planning there, unfortunately. So it's really important that we make sure that these new transport-oriented developments are future-proofed and not trying to solve this retrofit problem later. And what we've seen since we about the time that we launched that report, the Victorian government also started a focus on high-rise density as well. So we're going to meet with them and also send them those learnings as well. So I think the lessons from Walleye Creek are applicable around New South Wales and Victoria, but we're also now getting international interest as well about how could those lessons for instance, be applied in Japan or Indonesia as well.
Most of the questions that were submitted 2 months ago relate to the campaign on V2G, which has been basically successful since then. So I'm going to have to, axe all of those because there are questions about how we're going to go about doing it, blah, blah, blah. But there is a question here, how does Solar Citizens work with individual businesses or schools, encouraging them to install solar panels on their roofs and implement storage systems?
Not really. I mean, we're a small team. There's only 7 of us. And so we really focus more on getting larger scale policy settings right to enable more people to quickly transition to renewable energy. So Electrify Walleye Creek is a little bit of an anomaly where we're working with that community because we could see the strategic value and the lessons learned there to be scaled out more widely. But we do have a switch and save campaign on our website where we can send people if they're looking for recommended suppliers as well.
Excellent, because I get quite a few questions about this. How do I know, if there's a decent supplier? And there was a piece in one of the papers, I'm not sure which one, I'm pretty sure it was a Murdoch paper, about dodgy battery installers and, predicting that people are going to get ripped off with inferior quality batteries, which is actually possible. And where do they go to find out, some legitimate suppliers? I have another question here. I think it's from Billy. And it goes like this. Solar Citizens has called for the Productivity Commission to review the economic regulations of the electrical distribution networks. It seems that Ausgrid does not accept any responsibility for stabilising the grid unless the taxpayer or solar owners pay for it. What can we do to support the call for the Productivity Commission review?
That is a good question. We are actively campaigning for national energy market reform, and that is what we used the Sunniest Neighbourhoods campaign for initially, was those consumer energy resources roadmaps for New South Wales and for federally, and we'll be doing the same in Queensland. And through that process, we often do call outs to people to write submissions at strategic moments. So there'll be ongoing community consultation opportunities with that consumer energy resources roadmap. And then in terms of more specifically around the question, I'm not sure what our call to action is for our supporters on that, but you'd have to leave that with me as a question on notice and I'll get back to you.
No worries. Billy, you've got a question.
Heidi, I just wanted to add that I read in Renew Economy today that that the Commonwealth Government is going to set up a task force, it looks like quite expert people, to look at the total reform of the NEM, and hopefully look into pricing and the role of AEMO, and to focus on moving from the centralised model to a decentralised model. So I think the Commonwealth Government now is onto this issue, which which is so huge and so important if we're going to properly value consumer resources. Anyway, so just saying that question I asked was a bit old, but it looks as though the government is moving, but it's going to take a year. But of course, and by that time, all the coal-fired power stations will probably be all broken down, or a lot of them, and that's a big worry because I hear that we're looking at the possibilities of what do they call it? Loading, reducing loading and having brownouts and so forth.
It's called load shedding.
Load shedding, yeah.
Very common in India. That's what we know.
Yeah.
Well, Billy, that won't worry me because in 2 weeks' time, I'm getting a battery installed here at home. And then I will basically be no longer dependent upon the grid. Listen, Chris, you had a question?
I was just wondering what your assessment of the recent COP meeting was, if it would impact on your work, or how do you think it's going to affect what you're doing?
It's an interesting question. I mean, in terms of finance for developing nations to transition to net zero is very important. Solar Citizens is primarily working just in Australia, although we have done a bit of work in the Philippines in terms of training solar installers up over there through another organisation called New Energy Nexus. But we are now looking actively at what kind of role we can play more internationally, which, look, we probably wouldn't set up Solar Citizens Japan, but we could work with an organisation in Japan to share the learnings that we've had here in Australia. So that's the kind of role that we're looking at playing up to COP31 at least, and looking at putting in our next 3-year strategic plan. But of course, we don't know if Australia will get COP31 yet. So we hope that we do, and we hope that by then whoever the energy minister is, but, you know, say it was Minister Bowen, would be able to announce that they've got this Consumer Energy Resources Authority that helps to do the governance for our amazing democratized energy system, and to enable other energy jurisdictions to see that that's possible.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Great. Martin, you've got a question?
Thanks, Heidi, for your presentation. It was really great. I guess two sort of related questions. In urban areas, so not so much the rural and regional ones, are there trends in terms of which electorates have the biggest uptake of solar on roofs and batteries and so on? Is that more common in, say, Liberal electorates or Labor electorates or Greens and Teal electorates? And secondly, sort of related to that is, has the coalition acknowledged that their nuclear policy is going to require a switch off of solar? Because presumably if the uptake of solar on roofs has been stronger in Liberal electorates, I'm thinking about federal electorates, that gives an increased opportunity to say to traditional Liberal voters, well, you've got the solar, but you know there's a threat here from your own side of politics, nuclear plans. Just wondering those two things.
Yeah, Martin, great question. So our Sunniest Neighbourhood Awards has allowed us to identify those top solar producing postcodes around Australia, and many of them are coalition electorates, especially in regional Queensland. So last year it was, I think, 4 of the top 5. I think this year it's 3 of the top 5. So Keith Pitt's electorate, for instance, is one of the highest solar PV producing electorates in Australia. So that's why we've been having meetings, particularly with those Queensland coalition federal members this last week, and to talk to them, because they actually know already that solar is really popular in their electorate. Do they know that nuclear will lead to a solar switch off? Well, that's information that we plan to give them in the new year. So we're just building towards that at the moment. We did a submission on the nuclear submission inquiry just recently, making that those sorts of arguments, and we are planning to get that information out more widely in the very near term.
But the coalition hasn't actually acknowledged that in any of their public statements, I presume.
No, they haven't at this stage. So their plan is to run nuclear 24/7 in order for it to be economically viable. And the only way to be able to do that is to turn off the renewables going into the grid, including small scale. So look, I think it's a real risk to them, and it's very short-sighted that they haven't thought that through.
Crazy, isn't it? It's just, as you say, short-term political point scoring and so on. Yeah.
Hence, behind me, you'll see, Martin, the new signs that are being distributed by Renew Australia for All. And they say solar saves nuclear costs. So it's a pretty simple message, but I think it's an effective one. So we're going to be distributing lots. A whole box full of those have turned up at my place this afternoon. So we're going.
Yeah, I got one too.
Now, I'll ask one more question, and that is to do with how we can help each other as organisations, because, as you know, 2 weeks ago we did the induction cooking event powered from the EV out at EVs for Everyone, and we're doing another one this coming Sunday at the Sintra Park Farmers Market. This will be the first of a series of them that we're doing, being funded by Canada Bay Council. Is there anything else that you can come up with? Just get onto us if there's anything else we can do where we can work together, because as everybody here knows, we are a very, very active group.
Well, I mean, something that comes to mind in particular, if you've already got some events coming up, we would love to bring out our new mascot, who is being born on Friday, and his name is Mr. Battery. and he is a giant battery with a green cape, and he's going to be out there telling people that we need the government to invest in a federal rebate for household batteries so that we can capture that good, clean, cheap energy during the day and use it at night and drive down cost of living rather than investing in nuclear. So we would love to have Mr. Battery come along to your events.
We've got 5 of them coming up.
Amazing.
Only one this year, but yeah, Robin and I can have a chat to you about that. So we do that at a later time. If you're around tomorrow, I could give you a call and we could talk about it.
That's great. I think the other thing is that you've all probably really interesting case studies as well. So a lot of what we do is making sure that we can secure media coverage, good news stories, but also to counter negative stories. So, you know, like, how would you feel if there was nuclear switching off your solar during the day? If you'd be willing to put a face to the name and get out there in the media, with our support as a media spokesperson, we want to tell those stories as well. So we're going to do a new photo shoot early in the new year with people who have put their hand up to be spokespeople for these campaigns. So if you're interested, we'd love to come out, take some photos of you at your house with your solar panels in the background, or maybe you don't have solar panels yet because you live in an apartment and you're locked out and you want them. So everyone's got a story to tell in this energy transition.
Absolutely. Okay. Are there any other questions? Because I know that Heidi needs to go early because she's got a young family and we don't want to hold her here too long. Billy, have you got a quick one?
Yes, Heidi, sorry to hold you back.
No, that's fine. They're okay.
I was just thinking of your role in Bayside Council as well. And you talked earlier about the need to ensure that new dwellings are set up appropriately for electrification. But what my question is, in these new developments, which are being pretty well led by the state government, not councils, who is setting the standards? Who should we be lobbying to ensure that proper wiring is provided, that there's no gas, that there's chargers and for EVs, etc., etc. Who do we actually lobby? Is it the local council, or should we be talking to our local state member and to the State Department of Planning or whoever?
I think that is a very good question. But I think Energy Minister and Planning Minister, so Penny Sharp and Paul Scully is primarily planning. You also mentioned in the chat SSROC, so the South Sydney Region of Councils. I just joined SSROC as Deputy Mayor. I'm one of the delegates from my council. And Helen Sloan, who's the chair of that, actually came up and talked to me, and she already knew me from the Electrify Walleye Creek report. So they had read that, and they've been in touch now with my Solar Citizens hat on to talk more about it. And I think in terms of lobbying in council, that's a really good place to go. But also, I think your Canada Bay Mayor is the chair of SSROC as well.
Yes, indeed.
Particularly. Yeah. So I think if you can get him on board, and I had a nice chat with him, and he is, he was very concerned about single-use plastics. Seemed like a really good person to get on board.
You're talking about the Canada Bay Mayor or the Burwood Mayor?
No, the Burwood Mayor, sorry.
The Canada Bay Mayor has an executive position in SSROC. It's a sort of deputy vice president or something.
Okay. You're talking about Michael Magner.
No, I was talking about Burwood Council. I was talking about Faker.
Yeah. John Faker. Yep.
But I mean, I think you want to be lobbying the state government and the councils to be active on this. And I think going to SSROC is probably one of the more effective ways.
I think it's better than going to the council, to one council, actually, if we can get SSROC working together. And if you've got some leadership at Bayside Council, that would be a good thing for us to link to.
Well, thanks, Billy.
The other thing around the transport-oriented developments is also active transport corridors. So we also need to decarbonise our transport emissions, and this is a really great opportunity. I've been talking to Bicycle New South Wales about getting bicycle rail corridors because they're set up, the transport-oriented developments are set up around rail, basically. So if we also can activate active transport corridors at the same time, we can future-proof and we can mode shift.
Great. Stephen, you've got a question?
Hi, Heidi. How are you going? How's everyone? Stephen here from Climate Action Burwood-Canada Bay, as well as Australian Electric Vehicle Association. I was at the International EV show recently, and it's good to hear the vehicle to grid announcement from Chris Bowen. I'm not sure if you're a lot of people actually having aware of the two kind of two-step forward, 3 steps back with all kind of politicians, in the sense that if we're voting for ALP, they're always having this gas, coal, and also the hydrogen in transportation. So that to me is something in the far horizon that we need to be aware of. I'm not sure if that will probably be one of your campaigns.
Look, I think Solar Citizens has a really unique supporter base where we have people who are early adopters of consumer energy resources and really good news stories in terms of transition to clean energy. So we did actively fight against the extension of the Eraring coal-fired power plant, and we're pushing the governments to do more around utilising those consumer energy resources so we can get off coal. So we're very solutions focused. Things like coal or gas exports, though, we don't campaign on that. We're a very small organisation of 7 people, so we have to leave that to our allies in the movement. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is I think I can see your organisation is actually going toward transportation, and I'm all for that because Australian Electric Vehicle Association. Yes, we do also lobby for micro mobility, electric forms of transportation. But I think in the future, just keep an eye out for that, because like the climate group is always coming in and showcasing how wonderful Labor is, and yet on the other side they're slowly putting resources aside towards the hydrogen highway. And I think when that announcement arises, I think we need to call it out. The sooner the better. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing is, through this meeting, I learned about your video, your documentary, The Defendant 5. I think it's a terrible documentary, actually, Heidi. It made me cry. It made me cry 3 times on the way from home to work.
Oh.
It really did touch me very much, because recently I went to Tasmania. And, I drove up the mountain, Kunanyan, and it really connects, if it wasn't for the work like people yourself, I might be seeing a completely different picture. So I highly recommend whoever hasn't seen it, go and view the video.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we're going to call the meeting to a close now. Fantastic to see everybody. Thanks so much, Heidi, for coming. And I'm sure we will be crossing paths soon. I'll call you soon. And not tonight, to talk about what we'll do with our induction cooking demonstrations and so on.
Well, I just want to say it's been so great to cross paths with Climate Action Canada Bay, and the Smart Energy Expo that you did, that you hosted a stall for us at Solar Citizens, and we got to speak on a few panels. Is cross-pollinated a whole lot of great opportunities to work more with your organisation, and thank you for coming out to the EVs for Everyone event, showing us your vehicle to grid. I think that seeing those sorts of things out in the community can be quite transformative for people, and it also really helps to drive the political will as well, because you get that public uptake, you get that visibility, and so what you're all doing, massive pats on the back to you all, and we hope that Solar Citizens can continue to work alongside and support each other moving forward.
Thank you very much. You take care. I'll formally end the meeting now.
Thanks very much indeed, Heidi. It was great.
Yeah. Bye.
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 Bye.